Please welcome Derek, our moderator, and panelists. Thanks.
Green light's on. There we go. Great. Thank you very much, Elizabeth and the team at ClimateWest for all the great work to organize the conference and to bring us all together. I'm not sure if everyone knows this or gets to kind of see some of the behind the scenes look at stuff, but someone who is invited to come and moderate and participate in the panel and the discussion, seeing the behind the scenes work and the late night emails and the organization and following a checkup on all the last details has just been tremendous. So thanks again. Delighted to be here and to be participating in this conversation in particular. A topic on resourcing resilience, aligning economics, policy, and community action. These are actually pretty hot button words for me. This, some people might glaze over, but this is a topic I could spend a lot of time talking about and thinking about in the work that I get to do on a daily basis. And so we're going to explore how economic policy, community actors are incorporating climate risks into planning and decision making. And I think we really want this to be a conversation as well. So we're going to have a chat and a conversation up here on the stage, but really do want to put the invitation out there. If you have questions and comments, we'd like to invite you to participate, come up to the mics, add the question online, and we'll try to make lots of space for that as we go forward. We are joined by a really tremendous panel of speakers. I'll be introducing each of them in a little more detail, give each of them the chance to also introduce the work they do and their organizations. But just to orient us, we have Emilia Cameron with the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. We have David Leibl with Wawanesa Insurance, and Duane Nicol to my left here with the City of Selkirk, who I'm not sure, but from the last session, I think there's fans in the room of the City of Selkirk. Any Selkirk fans in the room? Yeah. No pressure, Duane, to follow up on that. So briefly, just as we get started, the work that I do is an organization called BizforClimate, and we really focus on bringing together businesses around issues and topics of climate change and that intersection of public policy. So it's a network and a member-based organization with companies that were convening conversations of what do climate solutions look like, what are those policy solutions we need to help move the needle in the right direction from a climate perspective and from an economic perspective of how we move through this transition and how businesses be successful and along the way. So a lot of the conversation tends to focus around mitigation and kind of emissions reduction and topics like net zero, which are important. But what I find increasingly is that it's the topic of resilience and adaptation that is coming more and more to the forefront. It's more top of mind for business. It's more driving some of the conversation and the awareness of okay, what do we need to know? Why do we need to know this? And what do we start to do about it? Which actually opens up the door in some ways to the conversation on the mitigation side of well, why do we have to do all this? And what else can we do to minimize the things we have to do going forward? So we're very much in these conversations, and I'm really interested to hear different perspectives from industry and from communities of how we move forward some of these important public policy, planning, and infrastructure decisions and discussions, and deal with the risk and build more resilience into our communities. So we're going to talk more about the role of insurers and governments and the private sector and how different tools, incentives, financing models, and insurance can play in helping to bring this about and what some of these different roles are. And ultimately sort of thinking about how we can accelerate practical adaptation actions and how we can plan for risk in a changed and a changing climate. So a lot of it then is talking about those enabling conditions, and that's a word I'm talking about more and more in our network. So with that, sort of setting the context a little bit, we're going to start introducing our panels here, and we're going to start with Emilia Cameron. Emilia is the manager of climate resilient communities with the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, or ICLR. And she's based at the ICLR Resilience Display Center here in Winnipeg. And if anyone is not familiar with this or had a chance to see or visit, this is a tremendous facility that really displays very visually and in a very interactive and effective way different aspects of climate resilience and risks and what it means to buildings and infrastructure. So it's a fantastic and highly worth the visit. Reach out to Emilia for that. So Emilia engages with government authorities, insurers, and community partners to build awareness and knowledge around practical strategies that reduce impacts of extreme weather and climate change. So Emilia, could you take a few minutes here and tell us a bit more about yourself, the organization, and the role you play broadly in around climate resilience?
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Derek, for the nice plug. So if you haven't been to our center, it's a really great space to learn more about these practical measures. But I just wanted to give a brief overview about who ICLR is and what we do. So if you don't know who we are a multidisciplinary severe weather research institute. We use scientific research, policy advocacy, and collaboration with insurers, government, and other community organizations to help create more resilient communities. Our work really informs building codes, insurance policies, even community planning to reduce losses from these extreme weather events that we're seeing that are becoming part of our day-to-day life, unfortunately. And at ICLR, we function around 4 pillars of success. So the first is resilient new homes. So we're working with builders and insurers, letting them have dialogues together so that we can create more stronger homes going forward. The next one is existing homes. So some of these homes don't have these protective measures in it. They weren't built with them. So our role has been to advocate for stronger incentives for homeowners, as well as our Good or Best program, which outlines some essential and comprehensive measures, just a few that help reduce their losses. The next one is resilient recovery. This is the idea of building back better. We don't want to just build back the way it was after a disaster. We want to build back with resilience in mind. And the last is just resilient communities. So working with municipalities and helping them if they have a lower capacity to become more resilient. And so our job is really to bridge the gap between research, policy, and insurance. And with disasters becoming frequent, more expensive, impacting homes, infrastructure, communities, local economies, everything. It also increases pressure on emergency management, as well as municipal budgets, and the insurance industry. And because of this, recovery is really not sustainable. It's very expensive and time consuming. So we really shift towards a more proactive approach instead of being reactive to these events. And like before, if we don't build back better, we're not going to get any different outcomes if we're just building back the way it was. Now, policy changes and stronger resilient infrastructure are important, but it's also about the household level action. That's equally as important. A lot of these disasters are occurring at property level, and there are very simple measures to reduce losses, but the issue is implementation. Homeowners are not aware of these risks. They're not aware of these measures that can reduce their risks. There's also the understanding that it might be very expensive. We do a lot of economic studies on this, and it turns out that, for example, having adaptation measures in your home will actually increase the value of your home by a significant amount. There's also issues with the idea that it won't happen to me. It's something that we're facing a lot. I'm sure some of you might even think that, though I hope not, given the state that we're in. And also, there's low understanding of risk in general. If someone's located in the wild urban interface area, they need to be made aware that they are at risk for potential wildfire, and also what they need to do going forward. And so what really helps implementation are those broader systems, the incentives, whether it's municipal or insurance, municipal policies, bylaws, making things mandatory, but also education is a very important aspect, and that's what we have been working on a lot as a research industry or organization. We strive to turn that research into practical action for homeowners. But also, being here today, collaboration is very important. It's not just a one sector solution. This involves government, insurers, local organizations, homeowners. They all play a specific role in this space. And so, long story short, we know what to do. There's so much research on this. We just need to accelerate implementation and make resilient choices more accessible, as well as practical and more widespread.
Fantastic. Thank you, Emilia. You've given us a number of great ideas there, and I think throughout the course of the conversation, we want to circle back and how we can unpack some of that. That's more at the systems level, at the pillars of activity where you're trying to focus on and drive some impact, and also at the property owner level as well, and how this all comes together. So look forward to picking up on that as we move forward. We're going to turn to David. Introduce David, who is Vice President of Sustainability and Corporate Affairs at Wawanesa Insurance. And he oversees sustainability strategy, government relations, and external affairs for the corporation. So David brings a business-focused perspective to climate risk and community resilience, and informed career at the intersection of public policy, political strategy, consulting, and sustainability. So lots of different perspectives to bring into this. So David, let's turn it over to you. Tell us about yourself and your role, and kind of where you sit at this intersection with an insurance company, right, in terms of looking at insurance, climate resilience.
Sure. Thanks, Derek. Thank you for being here. Thanks for having me here. I'm really pleased to be here with my brilliant colleagues. You may have met them: Kira Conrad, Kristen Spears, Carla Trail, and Darren. I see you in the back there, and I count you as a brief colleague. Our paths were on the same path for a while, but certainly one of the most brilliant minds in the room. I'm feeling a bit intimidated. I didn't know that you're supposed to bring a fan club like Duane has. I didn't. It'd be a harder role, I think, than you, Duane, for me to. Oh, okay, that's good. I feel validated. By brief show of hands, is anyone in the room who feels mostly satisfied with the pace that we're going as a society right now when it comes to prevention and adaptation, responding to climate risk?
We promise to call you out if you put your hand up, but we might if you put your hand up.
No hands but laughter, and fair enough. Is there anyone in the room who's at any time, whether at an earlier stage of your life or now, felt a degree of deep burning frustration that we're not moving quicker and not doing more to address a risk that is so conspicuous and obvious? Right.
For the benefit of the online audience, many hands went up here.
And Emilia, I like how you voiced it's part of the challenge, because we have a gap right now in awareness. The research is in. Your team is leading a ton of it. We don't anymore. We have a last mile problem right now. We have people who are literally in harm's way and they don't know it. And it's a public policy failure, in my view, that we haven't done a better job as a society in bridging the gap. I work at an insurance company. I think we have skin in the game, and I think we have some moral responsibility to at least close part of this gap. And we're a mutual insurance company. So Wawanesa Insurance, we're headquartered here. We're very proud to be headquartered in Manitoba. We operate across the country. We have about 1.8 million Canadians that trust us with their insurance. They own the company. So we're a mutual-based insurer. Sort of a parallel in the financial sector would be like a credit union. And so we think that we have some extra responsibility to help address this challenge or this crisis. We're also not alone in that. Other insurers, regardless of their structure, are stepping up. But it's not enough, and I'd like to speak a little bit about that in the couple minutes that Derek's given me before we go to questions, I think. When I was in my 20s, and I won't tell you how long ago that was, but it was a long time ago, and I was working in sustainability-related fields, and I worked in consulting for a long time. What gave me some comfort, and perhaps you can relate to this, is this idea that, well, we know the science, and we can see it, but climate change is an existential threat. And so once regular people who have better things to do than worrying about climate change all day can see the effects right in their own backyards, when it's impacting their families, their well-being, their communities, their kids, will see action. And that moment is now. And we still have this gap. One of the things, I don't come from insurance, I've been with Wawanesa for about 5 years. I had never expected that working for an insurance company, that I would have the opportunity and the privilege to be on the front lines of these discussions on climate change. That is never an association I had. But it makes sense to me now, because insurance people, always the most fun at parties, but insurance people like things that are observable and measurable. And climate change is observable and measurable. And when you go to insurance conferences now, have this disproportionate focus, yes, on AI, yes, on other things, societal trends, consumer behavior, but climate change. And the reason is that it's happening now. When I was growing up, we didn't have hailstorms rolling through Alberta and causing $3 billion in damage in a couple of hours. We didn't have wildfires in Kelowna. Yes, there were fires, but nothing like a $500 million fire, and still considered a relatively small fire in the broader, we call them CATs, catastrophes in insurance, climate risk landscape. In 40 hours in Southern Ontario and Quebec, $1 billion rainfall. If you go back just a short time, so back when I was in my 20s, we would have annual average insured losses due to severe weather in Canada in the order of about $300 to $500 million a year. That can now happen in a day, and it is happening in a day. 2025 is an interesting use case. If you were here in Manitoba, your summer was diminished because you were inhaling the wildfire smoke that was ever present in the air. From a pure insurance context, it was actually a good year. Why? Because those communities that were evacuated and threatened didn't actually burn. We know the psychological effects in trauma. Some of those communities, northern communities, have been evacuated repeatedly. We have some data in Canada on some of the indirect costs. So in 2023, when there were wildfires in Southern Ontario, in the span of a week in June, there's $1.3 billion in net new cost to the healthcare system. Asthma, elderly people already vulnerable, having accelerated health impacts, the smoke exposure, sometimes chronic. So when we do measure it, we see the cost to society is enormous. And what we do know, and again, here's somewhere we don't need any more research, I'm sure it's come up in some context in this conference, for every dollar invested in adaptation and climate resilience, you avoid $15 in future loss costs. And that doesn't even fully capture the healthcare costs. Those are just the physical losses. So it's a pretty good bargain. How we get there is the question still to answer. I'll stop talking for now, but I hope to tell you more over the next 45 minutes that I think we have about some of the stuff that we're doing, where there's still gaps, and how we might close them. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. Tremendous context. And, I touched on a little bit earlier, some of the work I do in terms of like working with a broader network of businesses and companies and trying to raise awareness and drive engagement around the topics and why this is an important matters to our businesses and to our communities, of course, but, helping those ideas to resonate. And it's no coincidence that we've done some of our programming and taken groups of companies to go to places like the ICLR, and we've had presentations from Wawanesa sharing this type of numbers and data, because it gets very real from a business and economic perspective when you see the numbers and the graphs and the trends, and that just it helps to bring it home. So it's really great you're able to be sharing that that insight and that research, and how do we help to continue to get it out there. So, Duane, Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Selkirk. So Duane is a former city councillor with the city from 2002 to 2014 and was a key force behind the establishment of Selkirk's public transit system. He is a 2025 winner of the Lieutenant Governor of Manitoba's Award for Leadership in Municipal Administration and a board chair for Efficiency Manitoba. So under his leadership, Selkirk has become recognized for its environmental stewardship and progressive, award-winning approach to managing municipal infrastructure. So Duane, I invite you to tell us a little bit more about your work and your role, and what are you seeing this, especially from that municipal perspective in this conversation?
I feel like there's been a lot of build here. So I'm just gonna first say that I'm gonna do my best to be perfectly imperfect today. I don't have a list of stats. I don't think that I'm going to convince anyone in the room today of anything new. I think my job is to talk about kind of where climate adaptation or climate action meets the ground, and our work to change our community to respond to that. So I am the chief administrative officer for the city of Selkirk. I am the person between administration and council. You know, the work that we do is really about, you know, often very practical, hands-on. It's infrastructure. It's the day-to-day direct municipal services. And when I started at the city, we needed. Frankly, we were struggling with the cost of infrastructure. We had been depopulating for 30 years, and everything was broken. Right, like we just could not pay to keep up with the infrastructure, and my job was sort of to be brought in to see if we can turn that around. And in that effort, we realized as we were building our asset management system, so you know, kind of a coordinated approach to infrastructure management, that we were building the old city. We were rebuilding the way it was, and replacing things under the old climate. And frankly, I thought if we don't integrate climate adaptation into the work that we're doing, we're just being negligent. We're going to spend millions of dollars every year putting pavement and pipe into and on top of the ground, and we're going to then have to tear it up and replace it in 30 or 40 years as the impacts of climate change are going to, you know, reshape our entire approach. So I really feel like my job is to lead my team and to make climate change boring, like climate action boring, to make it routine, because routine gets done. To integrate, we talk about the cost of doing the thing, and that scares people off at the municipal level. We heard today we're 30% better than the nation's budget. It still feels like a terrible crunch at budget time, that we have to do the work that we need to do. And so, you know, how do we take every infrastructure dollar and turn it into a climate action dollar? And we do that by integrating and changing decision making. So my approach, the approach that I tried to bring to the work, is to think in systems, to understand that resilience, the concept of resilience, is actually just an emergent property of a complex system. We become resilient by virtue of a million different decisions being made by 1,000 different actors, and this is so how do we change all of those little things? And we do that by changing human systems, by changing policies and procedures, by making it just a thing that we do each and every day. When we make infrastructure decisions, we were going to spend $2 million in the next year on infrastructure in the small city of Selkirk. We got to make sure every one of those dollars is actually making us better. So we talked about building back better, replacing better, right? And the other thing is, no municipality in Canada, this is a bombastic statement, Dave's probably got the data on it, but like, none of us can afford the stuff we have. There's not enough. We've overbuilt, generally speaking, in North America, but particularly in Canada. So, and we're replacing stuff that we can't afford to replace. What we need to be doing is looking for ways at building more resilient and natural systems and integrating nature into our infrastructure. So that's the other thing that I hope to speak to today, is how do we do that? Because in the long run, it's not just about. What I'd like to see happen is move beyond resilience into anti-fragile. How do we make community systems that actually get better as they're challenged? And there's lots of ways that we can be doing that as well. And I think in the long run, that's more affordable. I could ramble on and on about bringing people along with us for the ride and how we build the community up and engage the community. And we'll talk about that when we get into questions.
It sounds good. We're essentially going to roll into questions. So why don't you elaborate on that a little bit more? On some of that idea about the anti-fragile piece, and why don't you elaborate on that idea a little bit? I think it'd be helpful for the folks.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm going to skip a lot of steps. Go to myselkirk.ca/climate adaptation. We have an 8-minute documentary on the work that we did with the Prairie Climate Center with funding from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Stop by the booth later on. They do great work. so we created this strategy. I'm a big believer of if I can't budget it, I can't get it done. Lots of strategies that are really thick. They got a million different ideas and things we do and approaches we should take. That's great, but I can't budget any of that. So we created our plan with 12 distinct tactics that we can work into our business planning process. We have a formal business planning process. Let's break that and remake it so that every time we're thinking about projects, we're integrating climate adaptation mitigation considerations into that. And so we have these 12 tactics that are brought in, and a third of the tactics are all about our urban forest. And this is, we knew, we focused on what we could do, what we could control, and bring and take action. Trees are like the Swiss Army knife of climate action. They do 100 different things. They were very valuable, but they take 30 years before they actually start delivering some of the peak value of the infrastructure. Also, they improve over time rather than the big pipe I put in the ground that declines over time. So this is that anti-fragile. We're getting better as we go and as it gets stressed. And so by doing it, what we found was this formed a wonderful opportunity to talk to citizens because you can't miss a tree. I really believe that most people do not think about municipal government. I know it hurts elected officials to think that way, that like no one's thinking about you when they do their, but it's true. People are not thinking about municipal government. They don't care until the water doesn't come out of the pipe, the toilet doesn't flush, or they hit the pothole on their way to work. Then their interest is piqued. That's being polite. So at that point, you can engage them. You can insert new information into their brain, and you can have a thoughtful conversation about, well, a reasonably thoughtful conversation with people. So trees are a great opportunity because there's nothing going to interrupt your day more than somebody rolling up and planting a tree in the boulevard in front of your house, right? Like, what the heck is going on? And so it creates an opportunity for us to then educate citizens because now they're paying attention. They're curious, and we do that through a lot of practical ways, through social media, as we've heard earlier today, through the journalism and storytelling. We also just get in front of them. So when we're coming to your door to put a tree in front of your house and the boulevard, because street trees are really important, we actually knock on your door. We hand you a pamphlet that says this is why we're doing it. This is the value that it adds. This is how your life will be better by having a tree on your block. This year we're integrating AI. We're taking a photo of the street as it is, and using AI to say this is what in 20 years, this is what a mature urban canopy might look like in your neighborhood. And of course, it always looks better. It always looks better. So now they can visualize it and it's real for them. And then we have infographics. So we put pedestrian-sized infographics at the corners of the block. So when you walk by for your evening walk and you pass 50 new trees, there's an infographic sign that you can read that and understand. So we're taking that, what I call just-in-time education, and helping people understand why we're doing what we're doing, and it's building support, right? People, you'd be amazed at how many people may not want a tree in front of their house. We don't get those calls anymore because people are buying into that. And there was just we're putting 1,000 trees in this year, and there was a city news interview and a streeter. I hate streeters. Let's go out and find just a random person, ask them really complicated questions about what's going on in your community, and we'll use that as representative of your entire community. I hate streeters. This wonderful woman got and was ticking off all the key messages. So clearly the communication is working. I'll stop talking.
Great stuff. And like the wheels have just been spinning as you were sharing some of these ideas there. And I think there's also some sort of cross conversation to have with the discussion from the panel previously this morning on some of the framing and the messaging. There's probably something really interesting to dig into there. So I don't know if that question will come out later, but we can plant some seeds if anyone wants to take us in a direction. In terms of moving on, we've got lots of ideas to unpack in, the opening remarks from all the panelists here. I think we wanted to explore a little bit, like, what are some of the new or the emerging trends and ideas that you're seeing from your different perspectives and that are going to help us move forward in understanding, and how do we get to more action and progress. So why don't I'll turn back, we'll make our way back over this way to David again. Like, help us understand, like, where's the key points of the conversation happening? Like, what are some of the things we need to focus on? And feel free to add some of the ideas I know you wanted to expand on as well.
Thanks. That's a big question. I liked Duane, what you said. I've never heard it phrased this way, but that really resonated. And tell me if I've got it wrong, because I want to take it home with me. Every infrastructure dollar that we invest needs to become a climate action dollar. I love that. If you look right now, what's happening at the federal level, we've had a federal government making significant commitments, needed commitments into things like housing. There's been no commensurate commitment to ensure that housing is not built in wildfire exposed zones or on floodplains. People in Canada right now are living in wildfire exposed zones and on floodplains and don't even know it. And we risk actually making the challenge worse. There are things that we are trying to do as an insurance company. My colleagues here at Table 5 lead a lot of that work. We made a decision a few years ago as an organization to take the lion's share of our community dollars and orient them towards organizations on the front lines of climate change. Right now, that's about $2 million annually. We're proud of that. That shows up in a very real and tangible way on the ground. We have great relationships with organizations and communities across Canada. We have granting programs with an evaluative criteria, so we're able to allocate some of those funds where they can have the most impact. Our employees are proud of that. You mentioned tree planting. We have a tree planting initiative. How many trees have we planted in the past year? Okay. And our employees are proud of it. We recognize also that that's a drop in the bucket. We need much more. We're doing our part. We're trying to influence. Has this group heard from Tom at Cooperators yet? Yep. That's coming? Okay. So one of the great things that I think in insurance right now is we work together with other insurers. We have some great relationships with Tom's colleagues over at Cooperators, a large Canadian insurer with a somewhat similar structure as Wawanesa. Climate resilience is also becoming a bit of a competitive space, and we could talk longer. We won't because it's boring, maybe for some, about that today. But through an insurance lens, the better you can protect Canadians from the worst impacts of climate change, the more opportunity you have to confidently write insurance policies. And we would take it a step further, and we would say, and to ensure that that insurance coverage remains available and accessible, and most of all, affordable. And as I think you'll hear from Tom, there's some cool things that your team is doing in terms of mobilizing private capital to enhance resilience. So interesting things are happening. One of the things that I'm still not fully sure if I'm supposed to be talking about this, but I'm going to. We're launching later this month is an AI-driven tool. We're piloting it. So we're going to be a learning experiment for us to help close that last mile problem. There's people need to be aware of their exposure. But how do they get that information? So it's an AI-driven tool that we would make available to, we call them our members, and we're going to partner with some communities, and I hopefully, Duane, yours, to bring into the community this tool. You download an app, you answer a few quick questions, and then scraping publicly available data and the data that you enter, you're assigned a risk peril score that tells you how wildfire exposed that you are. This tool can score a number of perils, so wildfire, flood, high winds, etc. But in the pilot, we're focusing on fire. It's very immediate right now in Canada for reasons we all know. That's one way. We hope to be there. Duane, to your point about municipalities own most of Canada's infrastructure. Municipalities, not every municipal leader is Duane Nicol or has the capacity to be Duane Nicol. If you listen to the mayor of Jasper speak, and of course 2 years ago Jasper had the catastrophic wildfires that destroyed a third of the community, including the mayor's own home. But he frames Jasper, despite the immense loss, as at least in part a success story. Why? Because 100% of the community didn't burn, and it could have been far worse. And part of the reason is that community had a climate response plan. Now it's a woodland community specific to wildfire there. Many communities don't and don't have the capacity. So again, we have this enormous challenge now. We need to close this gap. There's been some positive signals from the federal government to marshal more federal funds. That's promising. We also have a national adaptation strategy right now that the Auditor General frankly shredded last year by saying that it wasn't complete, didn't address systemic risks in the way that it needed to, didn't have any meaningful implementation strategy. So, as a country, we have a long way to go. I think we're taking some tentative initial steps in the right direction, but more to do to close the gap.
That sets us up for a good follow-up question after of like where and how do we work on closing that gap. Emilia, let's pick up with you a little bit there. What are you seeing in terms of like what's emerging? Like what are some of the key issues that are really important to help advance this conversation as well?
Yeah, I think something that is really important, and I kind of touched on it earlier, is this collaboration between these various actors or these various groups. Resiliency and adaptation is not something that is just on the municipal governments, is just on the insurance industry. It's a huge issue, and collaboration. We are noticing more of this going on in everyday spaces. At ICL, we do a few pilot projects. Okay.
Is that a certain call? I don't know.
We do a lot of pilot projects with insurers and governments as well. Notably, we did a couple showcase homes out in Edmonton. They have gone through their fair share of basement flooding, and so we went out there, partnered with an insurance company, and retrofitted a few homes with backwater valves, graded the lot around their house to just to show that it is possible to reduce your risk with just these few measures. And in terms of ICR, we are constantly adapting and evolving to really the needs of partners, organizations, and governments. And it's constantly ongoing, and we're innovating all the time. We originally started as a research institute, just figuring out, why these losses are occurring and how do we reduce them. And now we're in this space of turning that research into action on the ground, and that's what is needed. We know what to do. It's now just the time of let's go out and do it. And so being here in this space is a really great opportunity for us. We are relatively new to the Prairie region, based out of Ontario, but we do have a new office here. So being in this at this forum today is a really great opportunity for us to create more of those collaborative, just collaboration in general. So yeah.
You talked earlier, Emilia, about the 4 pillars that really guide your work. I wanted to ask a follow-up question on that. In just maybe you could recap those again. But is there of those 4 pillars, like, are there areas within that where you're seeing more uptake, like from the marketplace, in terms of it's easier, and then conversely, where are the areas that maybe need more support or need help to push on?
Definitely. I think so. We have the resilient new homes, resilient existing homes, resilient recovery, and then resilient communities. And I think when you look at all of those, which ones we're seeing more progress, more action, I would say it's resilient new homes. It takes a long time for action to happen in that space, but it's happening. We are having we have a task force, a resilient homes task force that brings together insurers and builders to create more guidance for builders to create more resilient homes. And that's just one of the ways that we're seeing more progress, is that these builders and insurers that have come together have really been showing that they are willing to change the way that they do their business, which is really great. Unfortunately, we see sometimes that with changing building code, it's sometimes difficult for builders to change their practices. In terms of the space that takes a while to see action, I would say that would be the resilient old homes, or the resilient existing homes. That's where that individual action is important, and that's where we're seeing kind of the slower progress in that space. It's convincing the homeowners to implement these measures. They think of climate adaptation as expensive. Why would they spend money on that when they could have a new kitchen or a bathroom, something that they can see and use? And so it's really changing that behavior. That's quite difficult, and it's something that we have been working towards for quite a long time.
Have you been seeing anything on that is helping to encourage or incent or convince those older home segment?
Yeah, so there are, I won't speak to it, but there are insurance incentives out there where, I don't want to talk too much about it. David is the expert. There's also municipal incentives. For example, there are many basement flood incentive programs throughout Canada that offer homeowners some type of financial support to install backwater valve, sump pump, disconnecting your downspouts from the city system. And those are quite underutilized, unfortunately. There's also fire smart programs specifically out in BC and Alberta, but again, those are quite underutilized. They're all voluntary, and really we don't see an uptake in those unless someone has just experienced an event, or if they've had past experience, or they know someone in their immediate circle that has had that experience. So again, it's changing those reactive behaviors to more proactive. But these incentive programs are a start. So part of that is also increasing awareness of these programs. This is where we come in. It's also where we can help municipalities kind of get that message out there. But also during various stages of the home purchasing process, for example, this is when a lot of conversations can occur when you're dealing with brokers, real estate agents, bank loan officers, for example. These groups can have conversations with their clients about their risks if they're in a flood zone or close to the wildfire urban interface, and then also what actions need to take place. So there are tons of opportunities for this behavior to potentially change. And I think a lot of us are more aware of climate change and the fact that these events are part of our day-to-day.
Great stuff. I want to flip part of that conversation back over to Duane, and you talked a bit about some issues and topics related to kind of new homes and developers, and building codes are a part of the conversation, but it picks up a little bit on coming out of the prep session earlier when you're talking about some of the issues related to or challenges that municipalities can face in terms of maybe wanting to proceed further to maybe want to try to bring out higher standards, but there's challenges there where if other communities nearby are not doing the same thing, there's some dynamics there. Can you talk about that a bit?
If I can recall, yeah, maybe
Competitive.
Well, we don't exist as an island, right? We're in a marketplace, and we're a small community, and we don't set culture for the province or the region or the country or the globe. We're if we put really strict standards and rules around just for Selkirk, well, you can build just outside of Selkirk and still benefit from all the Becky from the city of Winnipeg is in the audience, and she's living it. The city of Winnipeg lives it every day. The ex-urban growth that happens, and so that can happen in any urban center. So that's always a challenge. We have to exist within the context, and we have to create policies and procedures and bylaws and practices that exist within that context. And I actually want to touch on something that Emilia talked about. We made some conscious choices in the city. Often there's there's a property line, and then something bad happens on our side. Okay, it's our fault. You'll take care of it. But if it's on the private side, that's for the citizens to take care of, and we back away. And years ago, we were approached with the providing municipal dollars, tax dollars to support the sub pump installs, and And we thought a lot about that, and we were asking some questions about how uptake would be and who would participate and all that. And what we realized is every time you put a backwater valve, as an example, and a sub pump, all you're doing is transferring the problem. The problem that comes from municipal infrastructure, by the way, you're just transferring it to the neighbor who may not be able to come up with their half and afford it. So what we were doing was we're just pushing more of the stormwater management problem onto people who are economically challenged. And in Selkirk, we have a higher than average, higher other than Thompson. I think we have the highest percentage of houses that are provided by Manitoba Housing, socialized housing, for lots of historic reasons. They weren't participating. So we were going to take tax dollars and support the people who could afford it most, and then just shift more of the problem onto other citizens who couldn't afford it. So we chose not to do that and just redirect those dollars. And now we're really focused on stormwater or combined sewer separation and planting more trees and using street trees strategically and focusing our planting on areas where we already have stormwater issues. So yeah, it's just a policy comment I wanted to make, but and that's that context, right? And so what we would get calls from citizens who were irate. So my cousin from so and so, they offer this program. Why don't you guys do this? And you try to explain that to them, and well, they're not necessarily receptive to that message because they're being told no. So our focus has really been on building the strength of the municipal infrastructure, so we can lead by example and say this is why we're doing what we're doing. And then look at mutualizing the entire risk for the entire community, and not putting more pressure on economically, socially disadvantaged folks in our community. So our street tree policy, as an example, so we have this robust but simple street tree policy, speaking to how we're going to manage trees, just like we manage pipes and pavement. It's an asset management policy. We have a maintenance cycle and we have a life cycle and we cost things and we have instructions on how to plant. And we also have a planting paradigm where we have to roll out and do more planting. So we prioritize areas and we focus on an asset management perspective. What areas are already having stormwater issues? What areas do climate change data tell us we're going to have issues? What areas are less than species diverse? What areas have low canopy? We also have factored in the socioeconomic status. So neighborhoods in our community that have lower than average community economic, income levels are prioritized. All things being equal, they're more likely to get trees than other areas. And so that's how we're rolling on, making sure as a society, we're mutualizing that risk and we're making sure we're taking care of the people that need it the most.
Right. That's terrific. So it sounds like there's a case study and definitely some interesting elements for us all to kind of take away and learn from. I just kind of want to get a feel from the audience here. Are there others, or start to think of we'd love to hear if there's other sort of success stories or examples or stories you've seen in your communities you're working on. So we invite you to please come on up, raise your hand, and don't be shy to get up to the mic if there's something you want to add or join in on this conversation. We're certainly here for that. Okay, we got a question. Likewise, with the online questions, please do keep sending those in. We'll have time to get through this. So yeah, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Lanyelle Bateman, Environment and Climate Change Canada. And I was going to say, David, that I'm part of your fangirl now. I really enjoyed your presentation. Apparently I'm team data instead of team feelings. Until you said the comments about the National Adaptation Strategy, and then maybe I have to take it back.
I was only quoting Auditor General.
Yeah, where there's a support group for those of us getting audited 9 months into the implementation of our program. Sign me up for that. But I wanted to unpack some of the discussion that's being taken, that we're talking about on awareness. And so, in the National Adaptation Strategy, we have a target about awareness and we have targets about taking action. And some of the data sources that we have are really showing high awareness. So 92% of self-reported Canadians talking about their awareness to climate risks. And again, maybe depending on how we're asking the question about that, seeing the high awareness. But I also go to the Cat IQ conference. I don't know if you go to that one. And so when we talk there and we talk about insurance offerings, and it's, do people know what their how they're insured, say for overland flooding, and what the offerings are, and they assume that they are, and they don't realize that they aren't. So I just wondered if we could unpack that a little bit more about the lack of awareness. Do we think that if we ask an open-ended question, people say, you know, because it's heat or smoke and they've experienced something, then they say yes, but then a specific peril like basement flooding or that they're wildfire, like do we think that somewhere nestled in the data there, and I hope we can have more conversations about that, nestled in the data there, it's the specific hazard. Anyway, just interested if you could comment a bit more about that. Thank you.
Thank you. I love the question, because I think that when we talk about awareness, it's important that we're defining, well, what do we mean by awareness? Because a general awareness, or an awareness sufficient to you taking action, your community taking action, government taking action, are different things. Just to touch on a point that, Emilia, you made around the incentive program. So, you know, this exists on a continuum. So, you know, I need to have some baseline awareness of my overall climate risk, for example, if I'm a homeowner, to be then down the spectrum where we're actually doing something about it. So this tool that we're bringing to market on a pilot basis will have that. So you have your risk score, but then it'll tell you, okay, so you know, do A, B, and C. Here's the approximate cost. Here's the inventory of incentive programs that might be available to you. Why should we leave it on the homeowner's shoulders to have to navigate that? Also, if you've ever been in a position where you've maybe decided to make an improvement to your house, let's say you've saved up $30,000 or $40,000 for a kitchen renovation, it's unlikely, at least for me, maybe not for you, that you might then decide with your family, no, let's not do the kitchen reno. Let's put on class 4 shingles on the house. That would be a good investment instead. That's not human nature, but the return on that is actually much greater, depending on where you live in Canada, than doing the kitchen reno. How do we make that more attractive? So I think what we see is, yeah, there's a general awareness. Is there an awareness sufficient to driving action? There's not. And I won't comment at length. I think the government of Canada has an enormous job in marshalling the country towards meaningful climate adaptation. And so no more jabs from me on the National Adaptation Strategy or anything else. But what we do need are simple, easy to lift incentive programs such that we're mobilizing action. This needs to become a nation building project. We have infrastructure in Canada that was built for a different time, a different era before these risks. It is an enormous public policy failure, and it's a failure to our kids. And it's not the fault of any one government. I get passionate about this. I have kids too. But we need to address it. And the return is pretty high. And if anyone in the room here can tell me what may or may not be in the Canada-US trade agreement that's under negotiation now, or what Donald Trump might do next from the tariff front, would love to hear it. And of course, we don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty for us as a country right now, but there is certainty around the threat landscape. There's exposure now, gaps that we can close. And so what we can do is to make, we don't even need full-blown programs. Let's have some matching funds. Let's light a fire under companies like mine to urge them to do more and incentivize that. Let's make it easier for communities to be able to tap into funding to put together a disaster response plan. Let's bring the stakeholders together. And this is all called for, but can we accelerate the work, I think, is the real key. The awareness is there. Our data would suggest at a baseline. The awareness needed to compel change, we still have a long way to go.
Duane, can I?
Yeah. First of all, just no fires. We're trying to prevent the fire, and that'll lead me into a comment. The one thing I want to comment about the data versus emotion kind of thing is I think first of all, everyone thinks that they're rational, but we're not. Like, we are not rational beings. That's not the way our mind works. You know, behavioral science has taught us that. There's lots of reasons why we make decisions, and very few of them revolve around data. Right? We like to rationalize after we've done a thing. Oh yeah, I looked at the value of the vehicle. That's why I bought the vehicle. No, you didn't buy the vehicle because you thought you were getting a good deal. You thought it made you look cool. That's why you bought the vehicle. Like, let's be honest about that. But so how do we use behavioral science to inform better decision making or better choices from citizens? As government, as private sector does this much better than the government does. But we have to get into that kind of thinking and understand that people emote first, and the reason why people respond and take up on these policies and these programs after they've experienced, because they've experienced it, because they've emoted through it. I've had my basement flood growing up. 3 times it happened. Right? You lose things. It's terrible. It's a terrible experience, and so you you react to that emotion and you carry that with you, and then you react in different ways. And so we have to understand a little bit how people actually make decisions, and we need to move into that space and be thoughtful around that. The other thing tied to that I wanted to add to is, talking about fires, which triggered the issue, what I like to call the building inspector problem. So we all know that firefighters are heroes, right? They run towards the flames when the rest of us are running away, and we thank them for their great work, and they save a family when a house goes up. Here's the thing: we have, in Selkirk, 4,500 homes, and we rarely have a house fire. Every day, we should be thanking the building inspector for doing a really good job when the building was being built, and thanking the CSA and all the regulatory folks that created safety. We got it mostly right. Every single day, municipalities get it mostly right. I've never received a phone call from someone who said, "Hey, Nicol, my catch basin worked properly. My property didn't flood." That happens every time it rains, but I never get the call. I get the other call, right? The exception reporting. So how do we take those things and recognize them and encourage that? Because the closer we can move some of these things upstream, so we have better standards, and we're just automatically adopting those things, I think we eliminate the choice problem, because all the choices are better.
Right. Let's take him over here. We've got a question at the mic.
Well, yeah, when you were talking about how Selkirk is putting in a lot of trees, I was wondering, have you looked at the rain garden in the boulevards or other LED low impact drainage measures that could be used to resolve stormwater management problems?
Why, thank you very much for that leading question. I really appreciate it. So just recently, we working with our friends at HTFC and J.R. Cousins, the engineering firm, we have a big section of Main Street in Selkirk, which is actually a provincial highway. We've been able to take the boulevards and introduce, for the first time ever, rain gardens. A few years ago, we've been doing a lot of focus on. See, this is the other thing: is we don't sell the work that we do as climate adaptation. Right? We sell it as we're improving the community, and so our downtown, we're completely remaking the downtown, reinvesting. That's kind of one of the strategies that the city had. But while we're doing that, we're going to make it better. So we're adding soil cells and brand new drainage systems to take stormwater and rainwater from buildings and put it into the soil cells. We're adding the rain gardens. Do they come without their learning challenges? No, absolutely. We're learning as we go. We're going to get it mostly wrong at first, and we'll get better. We got the general layout. Things freeze. And we had that crazy freeze-thaw cycle, and so now we got water sitting where we never had water before because maybe the entry point is too small. So we'll deal with that. We'll figure that out, but we're going to be rolling that out throughout the city. The other thing is stormwater ponds. How do we better manage ponds? So we're undertaking a whole stormwater management study happening right now. Our engineers in the room, and working to rethink how we can do that in a more naturalized way, and how we can create surge protection in some of those areas. Right now, I'm going to lead for a second if I could, but one of the ramble on is what I meant to say. We had one of our worst storm events in 2022 where we had two hard rains, basically with frozen ground, right? The rain on ice event, and we flooded in an area that there's no reason for it to have flooded, right? And the worst thing that I ever had to do is stand in front of the citizens who had basements flooded. Right? They have a walkout basement, had their property flooded, and tell them that the system worked exactly the way it was engineered to. These are one couple who lost tons of things in their home, not insured for that, lost stuff. They were close friends with my family. They cared for my mom in their final days. And I had to tell them that our systems work exactly the way they were supposed to work. And there's nothing that we could have done to stop this issue, because this is not the way the world is supposed to work. This is not the way that infrastructure was delivered. And so we need to, as a municipality, we have to come up with new ways, and it's not going to be more gray infrastructure. It's going to be more natural infrastructure.
Don't be sorry. That's great insight. So one idea is to talk about how we start to move beyond different pilot projects and different efforts, and how can we start to scale solutions more broadly and part of that is understanding where there are, have been, case studies and things tried and worked on. Are there other case study, good examples that we want to be aware of or could potentially learn from that you're seeing in the work you're doing?
Do you want to go first? I can have to speak to some.
No,
I think
go
you
for it,
both
go
might
for it.
have some further perspectives on that. How about Emilia?
Yeah, there are several examples that I could think of throughout Canada, which is super great. If I'm thinking about the greater Canada, this is not necessarily occurring in the prairies, but when I think about Logan Lake is in an area that is very susceptible to wildfire out in BC. And they suffered a wildfire back in the early 2000s, or they actually didn't suffer from it, but their neighbor did, and then they learned about it. They had their firefighters sent out to go help, and they learned from that instance. And so this is one of the only cases in Canada that took a proactive approach in terms of wildfire management. They never went through a wildfire, and before or after that early 2000s fire, they invested in fuel management, in fire smart practices, and they were actually the first fire smart community in Canada, which is really great. And then in 2021, a fire ended up going through Logan Lake and minimal damage occurred. This is a really great success story of a community taking action before an event occurs, because that's what we're seeing, is that an event occurs and then they take action. But by then it's too late. The losses have occurred, and especially with wildfire, lives can be lost. And this is just a really great opportunity. One of the things that they've done is that they've created an incentive program for roof sprinklers. So it's about $47 for a roof sprinkler. It goes on top of your roof, and the fire department controls it. So if they know that there's a wildfire near, they can turn those sprinklers on, and it basically wets the house and the surrounding area to prevent the fire from coming through. And this is a really great initiative, and it's I believe there's about 250 that have been installed, and this is just a great success story. There are so many other examples throughout the prairies. Fort McMurray, they went through that severe wildfire back in 2016, I believe, and after that, they have now invested in vegetation management, fire smart practices, but also education, legislation, and planning, and just implementing new policies for land use practices. That is an example of being reactive, but the goal is to prevent any more fires occurring there. There's also instances in Calgary. They have been doing the rain gardens, which have been quite successful. Edmonton created a new drainage bylaw. There's just so many. So I'll stop there and it's over to you.
Are we at time? Do I need to be?
No, we got some time.
Oh, we got some time. So it's not the challenge. Our reality is just the scale issue. So right now we are working with organizations like the Canadian Climate Institute, Emilia's organization. We're partnering in some instances with cooperators on this, working with communities where there is a significant risk exposure, and specifically to work with communities towards reducing that risk. I think your organization, Emilia, we've had some conversations around community response plans, essentially like white papers, or this is what is needed for this community, and then that's the baseline. And if you know what you need to be funded for, it's easier to connect that. The challenge is just one of scale. So we're an insurance company, so we have good data, decent data. The data is evolving very quickly. One of the challenges with climate risk specifically is that the old models will only get you so far, because what we're seeing now is an acceleration of the impact. Nonetheless, we know where there are communities where exposure might be more acute. There's a host of challenges, though, and Duane had spoken to someone. So resourcing on the ground. In many of these communities, municipal leaders might be part-time elected officials. To Duane's comment about the potholes if you've worked with smaller communities, you will know that the primary volume of questions from residents might be around things like potholes and municipal taxes and dust control in rural communities, not necessarily about controlling climate-related risks. So it's an awareness challenge. It's a scale challenge, but I think some of the promising work is underway. We just need more of it.
Well, I see we have some questions coming in from the online and from the Mentimeter. Some of those might actually be in the room of people sending in their Mentimeter questions as well, and from our online group. Okay, so we got one pulled up here, and it's aimed towards David in terms of, are there ongoing conversations with insurance companies and builders, as well as realtors, to ensure that they showcase the level of climate risks that a home on the market could face?
So yes to the first part, for sure. So Emilia, you spoke to some of this. So, as a company, we work and are part of the, I'm going to get it wrong, the Canadian Resilient Homes, two things, working group, and then the builders themselves. So, just as a simple use case, there might be others in the room better equipped to speak to this, but in Southern Ontario, where we've seen an acceleration of wind impacts, if the roof stays on your house in a windstorm, it's unlikely that you're going to lose the walls. And a simple measure to ensure that that happens are hurricane straps, so little metal pieces that you can buy for about $3 at Home Depot. One might assume that that would be entrenched in the building codes, but this adds net new cost to new home builds. So it's conversations like that that are needed. If you have a baseline standard embedded in the building code, then it doesn't become a material issue, and it's not a competitive issue for one builder to another or one municipality to another. So that's an example. Is there receptivity there? Yes, absolutely. People are invested in this stuff. The notion of exposure or disclosure rather around climate risk, at point of sale or on an existing home, this is a challenging one, and I think we're navigating this in real time right now. There's reasons why you can imagine, and as an insurer, this is less material for us. We can try and assess the risk, but if you were a realtor looking to sell the home, would you want that information disclosed? If you've sold a home in Manitoba right now, there's a voluntary disclosure, but it's not binding. It's incumbent on me as the homeowner to disclose in a written way. Again, it's not binding on me. It's not a sworn attestation, whether I've had water issues, for example. And of course, in many cases, the homeowner just doesn't know, right? I live in a mature neighborhood in Winnipeg here, so you don't necessarily have that intelligence. That awareness, that comfort in disclosure is a societal challenge. We'll need to get around it. But the more we make homes more resilient, the less apprehension, resilient, or reluctance there will be to have that information made public.
I know there's some similar sounding conversations with respect to building and labeling around energy labeling as well, in terms of how much, on the energy efficiency side, in terms of how much those use. I wonder if there's some perhaps useful ways that some of those things get linked, right? If there ever is some of that. But it definitely brings up some tricky challenges.
Maybe just quickly on that, just so you might remember federal incentives a short time ago. We had it done in our house. Someone comes to your door, there's a technician, they set up a blower fan in your door, they close the windows, and they're able to provide some assessment around the efficiency of your home. The tool that we're piloting now, we didn't build this tool, but a vendor in Canada, and there's a major bank actually that rolled out this element of the tool across Canada earlier this month, will give you that energy efficiency score, to your point, but in a less invasive way. So, no one comes to your home, you answer a few questions, and with comparable accuracy is able to give you. So we are breaking down barriers in technology. There's a great question on AI because there are implications from a resource and emissions perspective when it comes to some of these technological tools, but we are able to leverage them to provide information to close gaps in ways that we weren't previously.
Great segue. Question popped up for us here. I guess we don't have the screen behind us to share that, but it has to do with the AI and this question and the energy and water intensive nature which has potential implications for energy transition and climate change. And it's a kind of an open question on how these considerations are taken into account when we look to develop the AI tools. So I guess it gets into that responsible use and understanding side of AI, and also the infrastructure and the data center kind of behind that in terms of understanding those trade-offs. So you've talked a bit about AI and some of the plans. Did you have any comment or further comment you'd like to add on that in terms of how Wawanesa is approaching this in terms of use and implication of AI?
Yeah, it's intention. It's not just, with our company. I'm sure for most of us in our own lives, we recognize that AI delivers value and will continue to. There's, of course, lots of risks, and one of the key challenges is environmental. Enormous land use, enormous water use, significant emissions. And, it's really fallen to the individual or the individual company to make decisions about whether or not they might wish to do something about it, not dissimilar to how we might personally, or our organizations might choose to buy offset credits, for example, with air travel, although now the scale is much greater and AI is quickly becoming something we use daily. So for this AI pilot that I've talked about, we are removing the carbon with a certified third party. We feel it's responsible on us to do so. This is emerging in real time. So we have a responsible AI use policy within our organization. One of the tenets of that is environmental. It's also intention. We need to quantify this. So one of the great things that the government is doing in this country right now is holding financial institutions to account. We actually have to report publicly on how we are managing climate risk. We also have to report publicly on our own emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3. So scope 1 and 2, we have to do that for the 2025 calendar year. If you want some exhilarating reading, you can wait a couple weeks when we publish our first report. But the scope 3 emissions, are going to be challenged, and we're going to have to report on this. So we do have an interest to manage this carefully, as of course a moral responsibility to. But this is unfolding in real time, obviously, and that tension is inescapable.
Duane, do you have any perspective to add from the municipal perspective in terms of like where some of the conversations around AI and the integration into your work?
Well, I think municipalities face the same challenges every workplace faces, right? What are the ethics around using it? What are this? We have personal data, and what is the responsibility of the municipality to protect personal data? The other challenges we have, 79 permanent full-time employees, and what they're doing at their computer at the time when they have access to the internet, and every single application, every website is like shoehorning AI into the application, is a challenge for us because, the standards, I know that's use and not necessarily, but I think there are targeted uses corporately that we're starting to use. It's providing us 24/7 response to our citizens. We have a voice bot, and we have an AI on our website to help citizens answer, get questions and request services. This is one of the things where this is back to that culture or the broader context challenge. So in the last 2 years, since AI has been sort of in the marketplace, we've had a 30% year over year for 2 consecutive years, so 60% more call volume requests for service from citizens, because they don't want to go to the website anymore. They just want to ask a question, right? They've been trained by AI, by Google, and by all the big app providers that you just go and ask a question, and then we'll passively get a response. That's kind of, so we have to adapt to that, because that's what the expectation is. In terms of actual, like the data centers, we're going through our development plan review, and we're also rewriting our zoning bylaw this year. Our zoning bylaw, based on council's direction, will not include permission to allow data centers in Selkirk. I don't know if that's the right answer, but for us, it's the right answer. The water's, we don't believe that we can supply the water and supply the energy, and the concern is using, because there's only so much hydro access in Selkirk, and we want that for job creation and livability, not necessarily the private profits of a foreign company.
Great. Thanks for sharing on that. Very important public policy questions, ultimately, right? Because that's where, a lot of the impact. You got more to say?
No,
okay. Okay. yeah, so if we do have more questions, like to get those up. But even the work that I'm involved with, BizforClimate, it's a topic that's getting a lot more attention and focus. And rightly, how do we collectively, help support that expansion or scale up that's happening in a way that's responsible and environmentally responsible and socially responsible in all these aspects. So I think that's a question that is like cross-cutting across, all different industries and sectors right now. So a big one. Oh, there it is. Oh, there it was, like clairvoyant in terms. Okay, okay, I can't actually see it. So here, I'm just gonna hop up a sec here. So, is this? I'm not sure if this is pointed at anyone directly, but have you gone to buildings like schools or nursing stations and other health facilities to climate-proof them? So maybe that's a municipal question to start with, and
Nope.
Nope.
We got enough to take care of.
Anyone? Emilia, you've kind of got the broad-based perspective nationally here. Are you seeing this, filtering into, healthcare and school and education?
Yeah. I mean, I will say we primarily deal more with residential climate proofing. So I don't think I have the answer to that. I'm not sure if anyone cares to follow up. But good question.
That is a good question. So are we getting into sort of like who?
I can just say that Efficiency Manitoba has some great programs so recently just closed a program on changing lighting in schools. So it's more of a mitigation than an adaptation. But I think there needs to be conversation in schools in particular about replacing old heating systems and including air conditioning in Manitoba, because that is now an issue where schools are getting too hot for people to learn. So that's part of it. And there are also potentially in the future community cooling stations, right? So that a refuge in extreme weather events.
Big air quality piece to that as well, because of the, as we talked about with the wildfire smoke and everything. Okay, I'm gonna have to get up again. This is good, it gets my steps in while we're doing this. So, hey, so insurance leaders at the 2025 National Insurance Conference. Was anybody there? We commented that residential insurance may not be viable by 2030. So can community climate action ensure residents remain insured? So this is maybe a question to David in terms of, or maybe not. He's giving me a look.
Happy to hand the baton to someone else. So we're at an inflection point right now in Canada. So south of the border, language is used, like coverage deserts, for example. It's very hard to get insurance coverage. When you can get it, it's some stripped down version that may leave you underprotected relative to the risks you might face, and if you can get it, extraordinarily expensive. For the most part, right now in Canada, insurance companies remain well capitalized. There's a healthy, competitive insurance environment, and we in Canada enjoy very robust regulatory oversight by federal and provincial regulators that compel us to prove that we're actually solvent. What does that mean in real terms? It means if you have an insurance policy on your home or on your property and something terrible happens, caused by climate change or caused by something else which wasn't your fault, you're covered. And you can have complete peace of mind of knowing that that coverage will be there for you. We have to demonstrate the government has insurance companies that have got lots of money available and then some more, and they measure this and hold this to account. Insurance is a promise, though, and climate change absolutely threatens that future state. So if you have an active policy right now, yes, you're fully covered. But insurance is designed to protect you against the things that aren't supposed to happen. But if they do happen, don't worry, you're covered. When something is known to happen, that's not what insurance is for. And this is the challenge that we're coming up against right now. If a community is known to flood repeatedly, if all the data points to a high probability of wildfire, so yes, if you have a policy in place, even in those circumstances, you're still covered. But over the longer term, it makes it very challenging to write those risks, to use an insurance term, to provide those policies, to provide coverage at an accessible and affordable way in high-risk zones. The takeaway for us is that at a societal level, it's time to accelerate the resilience in these communities. We would far rather be still writing insurance than to leave the market and say, no, we're going to step away from the risk. In fact, what we need to be doing is leaning into those risks, working with communities, leveraging public funding to protect those communities such that if you live there, you can be confident that you'll have insurance today, 5 years, 10 years. So we're not there yet, but we could be there. We had $9 billion in insured losses. That was in 2024. That was a wake-up call. By some estimates, those annual losses, just through an insured loss lens, are projected to get to $50 billion a year in the coming decades. That's entirely unsustainable. So let's leverage what we do know now, get ahead of it, enhance the resilience of these communities, and never have to have these kinds of discussions about will I be able to get insurance.
And I think with that, with insurance availability and coverage also comes with stricter land use policies. Why are we building these homes in these areas that are putting us at risk? And if we are, why aren't we building homes with adaptation features? A lot of the times homes will now, as part of National Building Code, be required to have flood adaptation measures in them, like backwater valve sump pumps. But wildfire, hail, wind is not taken into consideration for that. And so if we continue to be building in these areas that are at risk and potentially, in the future, if insurance coverage or availability decreases because of the high risks, then we need to build these homes a lot stronger so that the risks and losses are reduced.
I'd also like to know who at this conference went to the National Insurance Conference last year.
Probably still recovering.
It's a party.
So we're getting closer to towards the end of the session here, and we just had a slightly heavier section there in terms of looking forward and some of the the potential risk scenarios. So why don't we? I'd like to go back once through for everyone in a short comment lightning round. Can you give us something in terms of a takeaway? Something to point people to. We've covered a variety of issues. We've got to look at some of the risks. There's opportunities, some case studies, but where would you point some people to as a takeaway, a next step, something we can focus on and move forward?
I'd like to just go back to some of the earlier comments around how people make decisions, because again, the emergent, resilience is an emergent property of a complex system, everyone getting to make their own choices and decisions and that kind of thing. And I think if we're failing to understand how systems work, and if we're failing to understand how people actually make decisions, then we can put as much data and much information and much we can should all over people, but they're still not going to do the thing. So we need to meet people where they're at. We need to bring them along, educate them, empower them. People act out of a sense of agency and pride. And so how do we build communication? How do we do things that help people feel like they can actually improve themselves, improve their situation? We're not going to convince people. I don't believe personally we're going to convince people by scaring them into action. I think what we need to do is demonstrate, here's how life could just be better. The community is going to be better. You're going to have less, there'll be less interruptions and problems and all that, and sell them on that component. Because one of the things that I feel that we missed when we did our climate change adaptation strategy was we really focused on the bad things that could happen, rather than, and we paid no attention to, well, what are the opportunities does this create? And I don't want to say there's a lot of good stuff happening. We're going to open up the north for shipping. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we're replacing infrastructure and we're recreating our city. How do we actually make it better? Like just a better place to be, more trees, like a place where you want to be outside and engage with your neighbor. How do we make it safer and feel safer? Those are the conversations that I think people respond to better, and then take ownership and act with.
Yeah, it seems a lot of truth, especially in this day and age where people are so bombarded with so many challenges and crises all the time, that those good stories and places in our cities and communities that make us feel better, there's a lot of appetite for that, I would think. David?
It's hard to follow up, Duane, on that point, because I agree with all of it, and you characterized it so well. Tom, your colleague Don at one point said we need an easy button for climate resilience for homeowners, and I think that's absolutely true, and that's the right way to frame it. We're in a cost-sensitive environment. Duane, you spoke about some of your constituents or people living in your community. There's real financial barrier. Even if there's not, enhancing the climate resilience of your property isn't what comes first to mind. Even at a broader level, if you're a government, right? Like there's so many competing priorities, that's challenging. So it's finding that easy button, and it comes down to incentives. Like we actually know the formula. We just have to implement it here, create meaningful incentives to reduce the barriers. And there is a broader national dialogue, in my view, is absent right now that is a hopeful one. I grew up thinking that Canada was the best country on earth, and the reasons why I thought that is because I was told that Canada was a stable, secure place to be. And I love this country, but you can't say that Canada is a safe, stable, and secure place to be in many parts of it through a climate resilience lens. We can change that narrative, and we can have a vision towards doing that. This is about protecting this country, and of course globally too. Emissions don't know geographical borders, but fortifying this country against the threat that's already on our doorstep now and is only projected to grow. So we can make those decisions. That's not a negative narrative in my view. That's a hopeful one. That's about building for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with my fellow panelists on everything they've said. So we know what to do. That is not the issue here. We have the research. It's just getting people to do that. So we need to look more at behavioral insights, behavioral economics as to what makes people actually make those decisions. In terms of incentives, right now a lot of incentives just come from one party. There could be a potential opportunity for multilateral incentives where we're having several different parties create a fund, and then that is what can be given to the public in order to incentivize them to better adapt their homes. But I think we're getting there. This is a very long and difficult process, and but we're on the right track. These conversations are happening day to day and are becoming more part of our dialogue. So there's a lot of negatives, and we see a lot of tragedies and losses, but we're getting there. It's going to take a while, but we're getting there.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are right at time for our session, and